So good evening, good morning, dear learners. Let us start the session on the colonial period and period of community and the migration part and all those things related to it. So this is block two. I think Navya have joined. Thanks for joining this. Navya. Good morning. So. Uh, So that is the indentured labor migration. So that is the main term that we are going to uh, learn today. So what is indentured labor migration? So industrial revolution and colonial capital, expansion of industrial agriculture. Like the tea is becomes the industrial agriculture now, and especially the expansion had happened during the British period, right? Coffee, sugar, rubber are the main areas where a lot of migration took place by force during the colonial period to work in the tea estate or coffee estate and the sugarcane industries or agricultural land and rubber agricultural land. So, due to this expansion, the the kind of demand for unskilled labor, right? So we have skilled and unskilled labor. So you find a lot of unskilled labor force. We need to know the differentiation of skilled and unskilled labors. So that had happened, and there also some revolution and that took to bring the abolition of the slavery. And during the British policies, there is a socio-economic crisis and indenture system, the recruitment mechanism for Indian labor migrants from 1834 to 1917, and major colonies involved in Mauritius, Caribbean, Fiji, East Africa. So that we are going to discuss today. So how this colonial period had impact on this particular area, why there is a force, and what is reason behind this force and everything. That is our main agenda of today to learn. So when you look into this indentured labor, we should know the definition and context and regional origins, right? So what is uh, the meaning of the term indenture? So that's very important aspect for us to learn today. So when we look into the definition part, it is a simple term. It is a contractual labor agreements, right? So three terms are here very important. That is a contract that is there, labor is there, agreement is there. So contract, it's the term contract speaks about how many years in terms of time period you are supposed to work under the landlord or the person who is the considered as an employer for you or who hired you, right? So that is a contract. The contract meaning, the contract is specifically says about the time period and when to and what time to what time. Agreements speaks about that you are agreeing through your signature, through your kind of in a legal bond or with a third person witness and everything. So labor, it is there that you are producing, you are giving your labor based on that agreements and based on this contract. So when you say indenture, it means that it's a contractual labor agreements defining work, wages, housing, and medical, and the migration as a contractual state regulated process under British laws. We know very well the history. that the British colonial period is prevailing not only almost in Asian countries, African countries, and almost all the continent, the British were ruling, right? They kept their laws and rules and regulations across the globe, right? So they were the state regulated process under British laws, and there were a lot of push and pull factors, right? So we know that why these people are moving, okay, from India to, what is a push factor, right? So during in 19th centuries, during early 20th century, people are pushed, means because of various reasons, people are unwillingly going to other countries to earn something and give to their people. So the major push factor is poverty, right, in India. So people, due to that poverty, people were moving towards other countries. I was told by my father uh, often that the special food like idli, dosa, something, it is once in a while, right? Getting the rice, it's very difficult during the 1960s or till 70s. That was he was expressing a lot of the time to me. So some festivals like Diwali or New Year, they get food like idli, dosa, something like that. Today, idli dosa is quite everyday meal. It will be in our plate in every day's menu, right? So imagine in 1960s, this is the realm of poverty. This is the condition of the people. Imagine the health condition. Imagine the kind of the food system they have. Probably they might have been in a hungry or had only one meal a day. All right. So this poverty, unemployment, and famines like malaria, like kind of disease during that time, where the main concern for the people to move from here to some other state, and the socioeconomic stagnation, right? So you find the jobs um or by the upper caste people, and the caste system brings a lot of obstacles to the people those who are in lower caste, and people are in village geographical determination. All right. So city people, those who are in city, might have been living a better life than the people in a village during that time. So these are the push factors for the people to go as a individual labor, right, on a contract to a state. And what is a pull factor? The promise of stable income. So come here, I work in our tea estate as a labor, you get a stable income and better living conditions by recruiters. But what happened is next another scenario. But the pull factor is that come you get a stable income, you can support the family, and you can join that. So the regional origins like northern India like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, southern India like Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, key parts are Calcutta North and Madras South, where the larger migrations or migration process took place in our country during the British period. So this is we need to understand when we talk about the system of indentured in India, right? So you see that during the British period, people in from 1934, the period of migration, where as an indentured labor, it is that the people from 1834 to 19,000, there were around 4 lakhs people migrated towards Mauritius, right? So, and even for example, Kenya, right? British Kenya. So people were 2 lakhs people migrated. Malaysia, it is around 2 lakhs 50,000, right? You see that East Africa around 40,000, uh, kind of countries like East Africa around 40,000, Fiji around 60,000. So people, so almost huge amount of that population during that time were moving to other countries forced by the British colonial rulers to ask them to move to other countries. So they were forced. So what prompted the Indians to emigrate in large number is because of the call of the colonial planters in accordance with the colonial government. So there are the colonial planters. Who are the planters there? Who are owning the tea estate? Who are owning the kind of coffee estate or sugarcane or the British landlords? Okay. So there is reasons why these people were asked to move to other countries, right? So what are the kind of plantation life and resistance, right? So plantation life. So they moved there. Then what is the condition there? It is uh, it's a harsh working condition, low wages, malnutrition, diseases, right? So people were asked to work, right? The history says people were asked to work more than 8 hours, right? So 14 hours it's compulsory. They have to work. So harsh working conditions. There is no proper kind of shelter for them. Uh, kind of restrooms or kind of any facilities like for their education and all those things, and they were restricted to move and they were confined to plantation. So if another plantation pays instead of 100 rupees to 150, they are not allowed to move because that is an they are in the indentured labor, right? So normally what is this will happen? They will give some kind of amount before they move to some other countries. For example, 50,000. Let us imagine that. Keep as an example. So I am moving, borrowing the 50,000 from India to kind of Malaysia, for example, for to work in the tea estate. So during the British period, I have to repay that 50,000. So I will work until I repay to them, right? So the worsening, and there is no proper record stating that he has paid 50,000. So they will do some kind of malpractice and ask them to pay extra, and all those things will happen. So there is a restriction of movement, workers confined to plantations, right? And forms of precedence. So how they resist that, how they moved, how they fight against this kind of injustice that had happened to them. Okay, so they done a lot of strikes, revolts, and collective actions by laborers. That is the form of resistance that had happened, and emergence of solidarity, right? So they brought a solidarity by coming together to fight against the colonial rule, right? You imagine Mahatma Gandhi in South Africa saw people of Indians over there struggling for their rights. So that type of things had happened. And colonial policies and exploitation, weak legislative protection, and government favored planters. Right? The British government favored the planters and asked them to even work as they want. They don't interfere, even though they know that there is injustice is happening for them. And conditions compared to slavery, like in terms of new system of slavery and global legacy, spread of Indian culture and transition in host countries, right? So here the global legacy has started, even though they have gone as a slave people of like slaves, and the Indian culture and tradition in host countries, socio-economic impact of modern Indian diaspora had happened. So this is a condition when we look into the Indian indentured labor there. So when you look into the duration of contract, initially the duration of the contract period was from 1 year, then was increased to 3 years by the Ordinance number of 3, 1849. And finally, initially they had a 1 year, and after that it was moved to 5 years. So during that, they cannot come back and they are not allowed. And the technology is not what we are enjoying right now, right? So in case of this is what in a Mauritius country, in case of West Indians, the contract period was initially 10 years and was later reduced to 5 years, as as like the Mauritius. So the period of 5 years was followed for all the colonials, more less until its abolition, right? So till the abolition was implemented of this indentured labor, the contract labor, then the 5 years of contract was maintained across all the colonial periods. And the next one we need to talk on the wage and duration of work. As I have said, the indentured contract had a fixed rate of pay throughout the indentured period. Imagine getting a day 100 rupees. So all my 5 years, I am paid only 100 rupees. So the payment was made weekly in the colony of the British Kenya, and other things is monthly like Mauritius. But the laborers had to a week and 7 hours a day in British Kenya, right? That is what in Kenya laborers had to work 5 days. But in other countries like Grind or some other countries like 6 days in a week with the exclusion of holidays, right? So 9 hours per day and 100, 280 days in total for a year they have to work. So except Sunday they have to work. So the laborers had to work in hours pay, per day from Monday to Saturday for 2 hours on Sundays. In some other report says, right? Even Saturday also or Sundays also they need to work at a minimum level, right? So what is the punishment for absence from work? So what they will do if they are not going for the job? Then first thing is it is a led to deprivation of wages and rations. Know that rations, so they give free rice or something, it will be cut, right? And there will be a cut every shilling of his monthly wages or imprisonment of 40 days, 14 days or extension of his contract, right? So they will cut off the salary, that is the first one. Or if they are absent, they will give, or they have to go for 14 days of imprisonment, or there is an extension of his contract. Okay, so that type of punishment is being given if the laborer is not producing his labor for or absenting from producing the labor. Uh, so what if the laborers were absent for work for 3 continuous days? Right? Imagine if 3 continuous days the laborer is absent and he will be given 3 months of imprisonment. Okay, that is the life in the plantation. Right? So laborers are punished for 7 days while 2 months imprisonment followed by 5 days of absence and all those things. Right? So the written passages. So how they written, right? So my contract is over, right? My contract is over. Then how I am going to return from there? Written passage. What is the procedure is followed? It is the written. There is a free written passage was one of the basic principle of indentureship at the end of the contract. At the end of the contract, only if I finish 5 years, I will be given a free ship. Means that I can come through ship freely. There was a disparity in arrangement to written passage among the labor in importing colonies. In case of some countries like Suriname, the written passage was provided immediately upon the expiry of their 5 years indentured contract. In some countries like Trinidad, paid full written transport cost for the laborers after working for additional 5 years only. Okay, so they need to work additional 5 years. That means 10 years to get the full return transport. Okay, so in 1899, the male laborers were required to pay half the cost of return passage, while females on the one third of the cost. Okay, so there is this kind of relaxation or something like for the female. So the countries to countries, it differs when they are giving their passage, return passage. And what is the process of recruitment when it comes to how they recruit the indentured labor? Okay, it is based on the uh, long and some kind of intending immigrants. Okay, there is a licensed immigrant agents by the British period. They will be given a license. So we say that in social work we have a licensed counselor, licensed social worker, something like that. Even when you go to the medical hospitals, any hospital, they have a license there. We can observe it and we can find the doctor's name and everything. So it is mandatory now. Every hospital should display their license or their approval from kind of the concerned authority, the medical board of the country. As like that, they have a process of uh, recruitment of laborers. The first one is they have a licensed immigrant agents, like the port cities, like in India, like Canada, Calcutta, Madras, and Bombay. They will work there because there is a lot of port system. Port is there, right? Because it's a seashore and a major port is there, international. So they have act in 1837, which says the terms and regulation conditions for the recruiting agencies to recruit a potential immigrants. That is very important for the colony of the British government. But in reality, the immigrant agent hardly recruited except in the vicinity of immigration rules. He forwarded all the requests to the colonies to sub agents in the countryside. So, what the sub agents will do? Sub agents employed recruiters who were licensed by the protector of the immigration on the recommendation of the immigrant agents. So, the license was given for a year, renewable, and all those things. So, there is, for our understanding, we should know that there is a licensed person by the British government to recruit the people, and there is a rules and regulation to take the person for the recruitment, to recruit the person, right? uh, and when you look into the next area, that there is a plantation life and resistance, right? That's we have looked into. So there is a forms of resistance that taken place during the colonial period, especially when the Indian managers or overseer known as Sridhars were appointed to manage the effective working of the laborers by the government, colonial British government, right? So Indian managers were appointed to look into how effectively these laborers are working. So the everyday reality of plantation life for the laborers were marked by the grinding overwork, low wages, malnutrition, right? Persistent illness and issues of poor housing are the main concern for our laborers during that period, and lack of medical facilities as well as range of punitive measures, like we have seen people will be imprisoned if they take 2 days leave or absent, including beatings. They will be beaten and fined and imprisonment. So that's what happening. So there will be a resistance will happen, right? So resistance in a sense, people will go and fight for their rights. Okay, and because this kind of hard labor and the condition that we have just seen will impact on their health of the health of the indentured labor workers, means who are going on a contract. Okay, and they will be having a lot of job related and environmental related diseases and mortality. So they have a lot of issues regarding to the health. Okay, so this adverse working conditions led to the persistent and the abuses that had happened persistently led to the collective actions by the laborers, which manifested through variety of passive and active methods. So, for example, I give an instant in happened in 1886 in Fiji. A major strike broke out in the year where 132 workers marched from Coronavia to Agent General of Immigration to Suva by carrying their work instruments. Right in 1886, people 100 and plus people moved from one part of that country to the another part of the country to the general immigrants carrying their work instruments, probably their sickle or a spade or whatsoever. So that is happened in 1886. And the large scale strike also took place in the year 1872 to 1913 in Mauritius due to the poor working conditions. So these are the resistance that taken place during that colonial period. So laborers are adopted to array of methods show their anger and including dissent, and they were including the being absent. Okay, they increase the absenteeism and being the idleness. They will go to the work and they will not do any work. Okay, and destruction of the property and the tools of the employers, right? So the equipments were broken, and this all will happen during their resistance, right? So what in another angle we also look into the overview of Indian women under indentured labor system, right? So where the Indian women, it's when they go and stay as a family, right? So Indian women indentured laborers generally have been under explored by the scholars. The scholar not explored much on the indentured or the experiences of women indentured labor, and the condition based upon the available peripheral studies. In the beginning, women hardly joined in the indentured labor workforce as they were viewed as a burden by the employers, right? So if they come, there will be a lot of burden for the employer side because separate restrooms, uh, they should provide family quarters and everything. But some efforts were made to take women and induct women in the intelligence workforce from 1840s. So the hiring of women gained momentum after 1860s, right? So there was a 40-100 ratio. Okay, 40 women for 100 women in the labor force during in 1860s, right? So in general they were considered as a reserve labor by the employers through they performed productive and reproductive roles. Okay, they consider as a reserve labor because of their kind of maternity, pregnancy, and all those things. So Indian women indentured laborers performed a task like planting, weeding, cutting, and the other light work than men, right? So they were doing this type of weeding, okay, hoeing, that means planting it, all those things. So they worked 8 to 10 hours, but they were paid a fraction of male wages and received a half of the rations allotted to men. Imagine if 1 kg is for one for two per a week for the men, only half kg will be provided. Means that they should eat lesser than men. So these were the kind of discrimination that took place against the women, right? So in the like Indian traditional patriarchy system was reconsidered even there. So they were subjected to negative stereotyping and performed the traditional roles of a daughter, wife, and mother. At the same time, they challenged the colonial and traditional patriarchy and exercised their agency to assert their gender identities and created their own political space. Right. So there are a lot of resistance even by the people, women, to fight against this colonial period. So, with regard to conditions of women in indentured labor, like countries like Fiji and Brazil, that women, it has been shown here, generally suffered greater hardship than men. So, that is what's the issues the women faced, right? So, the construction of identity, that is the main thing. So, they were indentured labor, they were facing problem, and there are a lot of issues. So, how they constructed their identity, right? That's very very important aspect that we need to look into. The legacy and identity construction. So cultural adaptation, maintain Indian cultural practices, especially in a closer regions like East Africa, Malaya and everything. Longer distances led to loss of ties and cultural homogenization and transformation of identity. So the main thing, how they construct their identity and how they enjoyed by constructing that identity is very very important. As the slide clearly indicates that it was easy in the very closer countries like Malaysia and east countries, but when it is some other countries which are far, they were able to lose their uh, the ethnicity and everything. So those laborers who went to East Africa, Malaya and Ceylon, now it's called Malaysia, maintain close ties with their villages, while those who left from Caribbean, Fiji had lost their ties given the nature of long distance. Like, so, the preservation of Indian cultural tradition is much visible in the host countries closer to India than far off. The reason is they were able to connect even within 2 years, or after 5 years they were able to come back and settle here, right? So let them finish, but those who have gone far, they lost their identity, some are not returned, those these things have happened. So the social institution of caste was no longer an important social unit, not determined by the social relation of Indians in the host societies. That is very very important, because those who are went as an indentured labor were the people who were struggling here to get their identity. Means they are probably from the scheduled caste communities, or those who are facing the problems here. So the social institution of the caste, it's not at all prevailing in the host countries, but it persisted in diluted forms in some host countries as the colonial government encouraged the plural society, which restricted the interaction of the Indians in the economic spheres only, right? So they were restricted not to involve in the political sphere or economic construct. So Indian labor migrants were drawn from varied regional and social origins of India, right? So it led. So the disappearance of the caste boundaries favored the immigrant integration of various social groups under Hindu identity, right? So that's what happened. So they all came as we are all Indians and we are all Hindus. That identity they brought in the host countries. And later, the Indian community was marked by the process of great traditional Hinduism or Sanskritization and syncretization in the religious sphere. The term Sanskritization is very, very important. When you say Sanskritization, the people moved from one caste to another by practicing their other caste culture and everything. So that has brought the whole people, those who are in host countries, to bring one identity among them, call themselves as Hindus. So the coolie identity of indentured labor, the another important aspect. You are all considered as they are all considered as coolies. So the coolie identity of indentured laborers had now been replaced by burgeoning middle and entrepreneurial class of indentured labor who were catching up with the economic growth of their respective host countries. Okay, so they become the entrepreneurial, or they try to identify themselves as a not a coolie, rather they call themselves as a middleman, or the people who are entrepreneur involving in entrepreneurial class. Okay, for example, a successful merchant uh, uh, called Rahmat came as a boy with his parents from India. He never attended school and he worked full time in the uh, Paragras gang coast in Malaysia. And his parents' indentured ship ended. He worked full time as a huckster and traveled throughout the Trinidad selling dry goods. And he became the entrepreneur there, right? So the identity has moved from labor to entrepreneur, right? So Indian individual labor migration across the world has, when you look into the Mauritius, as you have seen, the lot of number, uh, and it was now Mauritius is Indian independent republic with a constitutional monarchy system of Indian president and Indian prime minister, right? So the immigrants docked in Mauritius from 1849. This migrants are from India, right? So there are a lot of countries after independence, people of India are there, right? So the system has been changed. They brought a lot of kind of rules and regulations and everything to safeguard their rights and everything. So Fiji, right? So this is the current situation when we look into the scenario of the Indian people over there, right? So the understanding that we need to have here is how the individual labor system was there during the British period, right? How they were being considered and what are the struggle they have undergone and how they were able to overcome and how they brought the identity construction and what is the situation after the independence of the host countries. Like the great experiment in Mauritius was the British colony to test Indian individual labor migration. To test, first of all, people were sent to Mauritius. The first vessel arrived from Calcutta after 10 weeks of ship voyage. Okay, and sugar industry expansion created a demand for cheap labor. So between 1834 to 1910, over 5 lakh Indian laborers migrated, and women comprised 33 percentage of the workforce. Imagine, right? So, settlement and legacy. After completing indenture, many laborers settled in Mauritius. That is very, very important. And India became the majority ethnic group, contributing culturally and politically, right? And Mauritius became republic with Indian leaders, including Indian origin president and prime minister, right? Indian origin president and prime ministers were ruling the Mauritius, and kind of a privacy guard the immigration duct, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site symbolizing this history, right? So Mauritius is the one which and a lot of Indian people. And this was the country where indentured labor were tested. And indentured labor migration in the Caribbean, like the post-indentured period, most labor stayed in Caribbean, acquiring land or gaining social mobility. So Indian become the significant producers of sugarcane and rice, right? So the main concern of this indentured labor during that period is because of the agriculture, the expansion on tea estate, the expansion especially on rice, especially of sugarcane and rubber, are the main concern and main profit making industries for the British colonial people. So they faced discrimination and ethnic tension, but their communities thrived and becoming integral to the Caribbean's plural societies. As we have seen yesterday, classes also, we discussed about how even though skilled or unskilled laborers can do a soft politics in their host countries. So Indian individual labor migration in Fiji, they arrived in 1879 to 1906. Almost 60,000 laborers migrated, and primarily from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. The young labor force of 42 percentage of men and 45 percentage of women were under 20, and horse plantation life. Imagine under 20 they have migrated and referred to as horse plantation life, referred to as hell or brothel by laborers due to severe exploitation. Okay, so prostitution, forced sexual connect, kind of rape were the main problems in a plantation life. So laborers face caste dilution and racial discrimination and cultural loss, right? That they may end up. And Indian individual labor, after the legacy of Indo-Fijians, post-individual laborers became the land lessers and traders, playing key roles in Fiji economics. This all happened after the independence of the country when the British people left from this place. So Indo-Fijians faced scopes of discrimination post-independence, leading to migration and creation of transnational community. And 2013 constituted a marked turning point of better political treatment of Fijian, right? So after independence, the people, those who were settled there, were able to enjoy the benefit of their pain that they had undergone because of the tie-up, the negotiation, the policies of the governments had played a role in bringing the betterment of their citizens in those countries, right? So when you look into the overview under the Mauritius case study, the Indian indentured labor migration in Mauritius case study. So, initiated in 1834, the British Mauritius Great Experiment set a precedent for indentured labor migration. So, in the history, people were migrated from India. The testing country is Mauritius, right? Uh, the migrants were primarily in the sugar industry. The first batch, as I have said, is arrived, and 31 percentage returned to majority from northern India, and 30 percentage of the returned to India after the independence. And the result, the emergence of Indian majority ethnic community, culturally and politically active, and the UNESCO World Heritage Site is there, right? So we have seen the Fiji and everything. Uh, what is the condition Indian indentured labor migration in South Africa and beyond? When you look into the South African history, so the indentured labor began in 1860 for sugar plantation in Natal, and at most 1.50 lakhs people are migrated from Madras and Calcutta, and there is a racial segregation, limited economic activities, but many stayed. And there is a French colonials, like Tamil majority migrants as a reunion, Machigos and Guadeloupe in 1848-1917, and gradual socio-economic integration with the cultural preservation had taken place in the larger population. And you have the Malaysia and Singapore. We know the history, endangered migration, most of them from southern part of India, and traditional to the Kangani system after 90. So there is endangered labor system and Kangani system, where Kangani system is a kind of more kind of legal than the endangered labor. So what is a Kangani or mainstream labor migration, right? It is emerged as an informal recruitment system in the British colonies during the colonial period, right? Kangani or mainstream labor migration used for unskilled Indian labor migration to Ceylon, like Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and Burma, Myanmar. So Kangani system is dominant in Ceylon and Malaysia, and mainstream system prevalent in Burma. It replaced the formal indentured system, less regulated but voluminous in scale, right? So it means that the regulation is less in the Kangani system, right? So between 1834 to 1937, 30 million Indians migrated to these regions. 30 lakhs people migrated from this region, means to Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and Burma, equally 10 lakhs approximately. And 90 percentage of them through this system of Kangani system. Recruitment centered in the Madras presidency, now it is Chennai, supplying Tamil Telugu laborers for plantation and agriculture. Right? So, what is the uh, system of Kangani or mainstream labor migration? It is informal, kinship based recruitment led by the intermediaries. That means I go as a father, my son or daughter will come back, and my relatives will come. So, relied on debt, promises of high wages, and return passages. So, they will give 1 lakh or 2 lakh to your family before you go. Based on the debt, you go and work. And if you are not pay, take your son and everyone. It's a bonded labor, like a bonded labor system, and played a crucial role in expanding plantation and agriculture in colonial territories, right? So the evolution of the Kangani system, when you look into Tamil Kanganis recruited kin group of seasonal work in Ceylon and coffee plantations. I still remember in my village, people come from Malaysia buying good kind of tape recorder, uh, kind of audio cassettes or something like that. So, I think Navya might have seen the old tape recorder or cassette, like tape kind of things. They buy and come. So the plant has advanced money to Kanganis for recruitment. So laborers recruited from multiple villages, often accumulating debt. And you have seen the crimping practices like Tundu system emerged to manage labor shortage. So they will take people across in the family itself. The head Gangani system, the hierarchical head Gangani supervised sub Ganganis for large scale tea plantation recruitment, led to permanent settlement and social reordering on plantations. So this is very, very informal as well as able to recruit more people. So that the British government has promoted this Gangani system. In previous slide, we learned 90 percentage of them were recruited through the system to those countries. Imagine out of 30 million, 90 percentage of them through Kangani system means there is a less, there is informal and able to recruit more people, and because the payment is given well ahead and they have to work there without a pay, right? So the evolution of the Kangani system, early Kangani system is 18 to 30s. Uh, I think we have seen it. The evolution of the Kangani system is controlled Kangani system. That means 1901 to 1939 introduced the tin ticket system or Ceylon Labour Commission for regulated recruitment. So reduced Kangani influence by paying wages directly to uh, workers. So the Kanganis were not able to pay the wages directly to the workers. The recruitment license became mandatory, right? So they brought a kind of a check and balance. So impact the facilitated large scale migration yet exploitative and transition into regulated system diminishing Kangani authority. Okay, so the Kangani system has been declined due to various law that had taken place because it has the Kanganis were able to control the laborers and able to take over the system, right? So the political awakening, like Indian leaders like Nehru and Gandhi, inspired the plantation laborers. The trade union activism led to reforms such as education ordinance, abolition of Dundu system, minimum wages act 1929, and conditional voting rights. Okay, so the end of the Kangani system had taken place by early 40s. The trade unions pressured the estates because we have a trade union act in 1927. Okay, during the British period, we have the minimum wages act in 1929, right? So they can form the trade union and fight against their rights. So trade unions pressured the estates to replace head Ganganis with the staff, ending the system by 1940s. So the Kangani adopted roles example shopkeepers but also exploited laborers. Right? The post-system era that laborers still face poor conditions, marginalization, neglect by Sri Lankan government since independence. So you find the Kangani system in Malaysia, so-called Malaya in before. So replace intensive labor due to cost efficiency and reliable recruitment. Dominated rubber plantation until 1938. And Kangan is linked to workers through caste and kinship, but had reduced the power as employees paid wages directly. So each government has taken a few steps to stop this Kangani system. The one reason is the expansion is not needed more laborers for them. Already it's filled, it's overwhelmed. So they don't want more workers. So they are trying to stop this Kangani system and other things by enforcing laws. So this system where migration to Malaya stopped in 1938 and legacy Kangani served as the intermediaries but were seen as the agents of capital rather than allies of workers. So the Kanganis were with the capital people who has more money, they are not working for the workers, right? So the lot of rules and regulation has come and free passage migration. So Indian diaspora migration is categorized into two phases, that is colonial phase, old Indian diaspora, post-colonial phase, new Indian diaspora. So this free passage migration driven by the British rule and economic demands Migration includes three types, that is indentured labor migration, Kangani Maestri system, and free passage migration. When you say free passage migration, it is free. So you go and come back with the employer's amount and you will be paid. There is no debt or something like that. So free passage migrations are, unlike indentured labor, free migrants traveled voluntarily, funded their passage, and retained ties with India. Like key destination is Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean. Right? So it's a pre-passage migration. Right? So this system has ended both indentured labor as well as Kangani system. Right? So Indians in East Africa migration began in 19th century, driven by trade, colonialism, and the Kenyan Ugandan railway. Right? And the key communities like Hindu, Banya, Muslims, Sikhs, and Khans and Parsis were moved to those countries. So settlement phases, you find trade peak, like uh, they had an nationalism leading to migration to UK and Canada after 1940s from there, those East African countries. So we know that Indians in South Africa arrival in 1870s as a traders, like Dakwalas, serving indentured laborers, mainly Gujaratis, Hindus, Muslims were there and trading, goldsmithing, and shoemaking. So this was the history when we look into during the colonial period, right? The history is very very important because history will tell us where we are from, what we were doing, what was the condition earlier, now how. If we don't know the history, then by looking only this, we see that we are not enjoying, but the history says to what we are now, what the struggle had gone in the beginning, right? So during colonial period, this block clearly says the two major immigration process, that is indentured labor process and Kangani system, right? So indentured labor and or Kangani system forced or constituted by the colonial government, British government, to ensure that their colonial countries, other countries like South Africa, like Malaysia, Sri Lanka, to have the enough laborers to work in the industries of sugar, rubber, tea, and coffee, which were the major profit making of those countries. So that is the main thing, and we also have understood what is the definition of this and what are the pull factors and push factors, the forced our Indian people to move as a laborers to through using the indentured labor process. And plantation life, we have learnt how hard it was and how they were treated, punishment, and the rules were very very painful and for the laborers. And women in the indentured labor system, initial challenges, work ratio and roles, and gender exploitation that they faced in terms of payment, in terms of ration, and the challenges and resistance, and how people gathered together as a trade union to fight against their exploitation and get their rights. And the legacy and identity construction, how they constructed their identity in various countries like Mauritius, we as the that is the test place for the Indian laborers. So how Mauritius situation and what is the condition right now, and we also look into Fiji and overlook of Mauritius on case study, Fiji and everything, and how indentured labor migration in South Africa and beyond, and Kangani system, which is again slightly different from the indentured labor and the Kangani system in various countries, especially in Southeast Asia, like Malaysia, Singapore, and Sri Lanka, and evolution of the Kangani system and the Kangani system in Malaysia, free passage migration, which is the third phase of the migration process, from endangered Kangani to free passage migration, which is the migration is free, means they can go freely to other countries and work, and they are all funded for their passage and everything. So this is what our learning today. What we want to keep the learners to understand the situation during the British colonial period in terms of endangered and kind of what to say, the three major process of the migration. Any doubt? Okay. So I stop it here. Thank you very much for the learners for participating. Thank you, Navya.